And we are live right here on Operation Lockdown. We are into another week of being locked down, man.
We are live right here on Operation.
Trying to get questions here and whatnot while I'm on here. But so anyway, yeah, this is kind of my third week in lockdown, man, and it's been pretty nuts so far. I started this little podcast thing just to try to like keep myself sane, kind of feel like I have a purpose. And I don't know. It's been a help, man. It's been a positive thing doing this. So how have you been dealing with this, Steve? And yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. I just, this is actually my fourth week, and I went out March 16th. So yeah, it's is what it is. Sometimes it does get a little boring, but things on the internet have made kind of life interesting the last couple of weeks. So it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. It's all up to, okay, they're going to reopen this, they're going to reopen that. So, I'm blessed to be financially set in this mess, unlike a lot of people. So I really feel for them. And, I'm the only thing that we can do is just, like you yourself, is try to provide some entertainment for people and keep people engaged and focused on things other than the fact they can't do what they normally want to do.
Yeah. Even for us, I know that you're kind of a go-getter too, man. You're always doing something, but you have a podcast kind of thing going on too. Does that help you kind of stay focused?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, between the blog, the websites, it's kind of funny. I made this joke. I was like, I really rushed in December and January to finish my book for February, and then all this happened. Like, well, had I known this was going to happen, I probably would have stretched out and made my book even thicker. But the fact is that this stuff keeps your mind engaged. It keeps you. It's given me time to really dig into certain aspects of research and re-questioning things that were thought to be truths. And that's my whole purpose of getting into this. And originally,
yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about that right quick. I want to talk about who you are and what it is that you do, because you kind of have your fingers in a lot of different things, man. You're not just into Sasquatch. You're into like the whole paranormal thing.
Yep.
and UFOs. You're into kind of like all of it, So yeah, so tell me some more.
Okay, so as a kid, I got involved. I saw The Legend of Boggy Creek. I remember sitting there with my dad watching this on something new called HBO. And, the time we had the little clicker boxes and the wire going to the TV for the cable. And I remember watching this, and it ultimately terrified me. I mean, because the opening scene was of a small child running through the field. So I'm like, and you get that kind of attitude. And then In Search of course, with the original In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. And the Bigfoot episodes always like enthralled me. Oak Island, Loch Ness even to some point, but I watched. I was like, okay. So I had these things as a small child. Then you get into your teen years, and none of that becomes relevant anymore. The only thing I'm thinking about is cars and girls. That's it. Cars and girls. Typical teenager. So I get out of high school. I go into college for criminal justice, and halfway through my first term, my father got cancer. My mother didn't drive. So the second term, my second semester, I was driving my father around to radiation treatments, chemo treatments, stuff like that. And finally in 88, or 89, he passed. So at that time, I had gotten the opportunity to start as a loss prevention agent for a supermarket. And then I segued way into a loss prevention manager for another company. And throughout my tenure, then I be doing a lot of heavy investigating stuff when I moved over to yet another company, and I was trained in forensic interviewing and had lots of same classes that the FBI took. I took the Reed courses, which are the Reed model of interrogation and interview, and then eventually took the Wicklander interrogation and interview units, stuff like that. So I became the guy now. They were, hey, listen, we have this discrepancy here with the employees. Let's, take a look. So a lot of times I would be taking a look at, information and correlating that, getting them to sit down and talking with them, and based on their reactions, their neurolinguistics, what they were saying back to me, kind of made it really easy for me to discern whether or not somebody was being a BS artist or not. So, and then it got into the organized retail, organized retail crime, where I was monitoring.
So Steve.
Yeah.
Have you ever like ran somebody down and like tackled them and like took some shit? Like, you know what I mean? Like, have you ever been that guy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm there. I call them the wars. Yeah, we especially with the organized retail folks, because those people had the cars waiting for them, and they were busting out fire doors, and a lot of times I'd be right behind the fire door, and we'd
just like
taking them out. Well, if it came to that, but a lot of times it'd be like, get on the ground, let's go, cuff them up, take them in. And do all that fun stuff. But there was a lot of investigation and surveillance on that. Eventually, I became a private investigator and an insurance investigator, and started dealing with more of the criminality aspects outside of the retail environment, stuff like arson, set up burglaries, stuff like that. So doing a lot of burglary investigation, arson investigation, auto theft investigation, stuff like that. And, in a lot of cases like arson especially, it really puts you on the tail of who did it, because in a lot of these arson cases, the person who commits the arson is usually somebody that's associated with the residents. And a lot of people don't understand that. So it became very intrinsic. I was also a paramedic. Because seeing my father being sick, so I while I was doing my loss prevention jobs and stuff like that, I was taking courses to become an EMT. Eventually, for 4.5 years, I rode professional ambulance, which gave me a lot of, not only medic training, but it gave me a lot of seeing, because, there's three types of people that see stuff on the street, and that's the cops, the firefighters, and, obviously the medics. So I was in the streets, and there were times when, like example, city of Troy, there was a gang fight, and this guy had the shit knocked out of him, and we're trying to help him, and bottles are being thrown, and you see the crowd being held back, going, "Yeah, you helping that man?" Oh, so it can be very dicey. Plus, we did a lot of cases where we called them Code 5s, which were involuntary psychological commitments. And most of them were alcoholics that were so they had to go to the hospital for detox. And those were fights. Wow. So yeah. I've lived that.
You have a legit like criminal background. Not well, criminal, but what is that? Like just a police or officer kind of like.
Well, I again, I'm not a police officer. As a let's say as a retail investigator, again, anybody has the power of arrest in the United States, right, provided you see the crime in commission. Right. And in New York State, we're able to reasonably detain somebody, and we're also able to exact, like a police officer, we're able to exact for if somebody comes at us with a knife. Oh, all bets are off. But if somebody starts swinging, we're totally entitled to swing back and detain them reasonably necessary.
Yeah, so how do you take all this and bring it into what you do now? Like, how did you become, like, this person to what you do now?
So, in 98, a buddy of mine who happened to be a MUFON investigator said, "Hey, have you seen this book?" And it was called Monsters of the Northwoods. It was written by Paul and Robert Bartholomew, Bruce Hallenbach, and Bill Moran. And it entailed all these stories of Sasquatch, predominantly in the Whitehall area and in the Columbia County Kinderhook area. The Kinderhook creature, supposedly, back in the mid-'80s. So I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And now I'm thinking to myself, well, I've, and at the time I just came off a gig as a regional investigator for a company, and that company was run so bad. They had 75 employees in one store. This is kind of a laugh. In 1 month's time, I arrested 27 of them, almost a third of the store. It was so bad. The store manager of that store, who was on my target list, no call, no show, never came back again. And that was a store manager making like 80, 90 grand a year. at the time. And he was like, "Oh no, well, where is he?
Check him out.
Nobody knows. He just dipped out." So yeah, so I was coming off of that, and I'm going, I bet you if I get some of these Bigfoot witnesses in front of me, I can really see if what they're saying, maybe this is just a bunch of hooey, people that believe willy-nilly. Yeah. And so as I started getting into it, I started interviewing people. I interviewed police officers that had seen them. And really the turning point was about 4 or 5 years in. I talked to this one guy, and this is like, he's an former Marine. I can't say ex-Marine. I'll get yelled at by my Marine friends. Former Marine, Vietnam, in Nam, was a truck driver for 15 years, lived in this remote area for years, and he had heard, seen, saw something, going through his yard and whatnot, to the point where I'm listening to him recount this, and as he's telling me, I can see him get jugular vein distension. I can see the hairs on his arms standing up on. Well, let this happen again, and he's got this jerry-rigged big spotlight that he can pull out if something happens like that again. Excuse me. So here's this tough guy, hunter, truck driver, former Marine, NAM, war experience, everything. Scared shitless.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm thinking, well, this guy is definitely not lying. Definitely. And nor did I think the police officers were lying. So I go, there is something to this. And that was my real intent in getting it, just to see whether or not, my investigative question marks. I love a good mystery.
Right. You wanted to see if this Bigfoot stuff was real.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm going to dip into this. And for some reason, the whole moniker of Sasquatch Detective was, I'm a story detective. And there was a guy, he passed away. I forget his name, but he had passed away many years ago. Was named the Squatch Commando, because he was an ex-special forces guy that was in there. So I'm like, well, I'll just call myself the Squatch Detective. And it was just an email. I didn't call myself that. That was my email handle. It was Squatch Detective at yahoo.com. Right. So then I created this website, one of the freebies way back in the late 90s. And what it did was it created the website based on your email address. So it became, freeyellow.squatchdetective.com. And I'm like, and so it just stuck. And then people started calling me the Squatch Detective. So it just kind of stuck that way, and that's how that evolved. But yeah, I'm a licensed private investigator in New York State. Have had years of interviewing people that have been dishonest and people that have been honest, investigating crimes. Probably over 1,200 arrests under my belt. Probably about 150 to 200 felony arrests. Wow. I mean, I'm talking about taking people that have stole 5 figures from companies and stuff like that after these massive investigations. I remember one day figuring this was going to be like a few $100 case. Turned out to be, here I am 7 hours into the investigation. I'm with a detective serving a search warrant on this guy's house, and he's got literally tens of thousands of merchandise from the store that he obtained illegally. So stuff like, real deal stuff. I mean, this isn't.
Where I first heard of you is the famous hoax of 2008. Am I right? And the old Rick Dyer case. That's when I saw you come on the scene. That's when I first found out there was really somebody out there trying to be the police of the crypto world. You busted one of the most well-known hoaxers ever. So and I want to talk about that. Yeah.
Sure. So it's funny how things arrange themselves. Originally in 2006, I started kind of doing missions with Biscardi because, and I was talking to all my friends on the QT, going, listen, I want to see, and I had like 4 or 5 friends in the circle, and I had one outside the circle that nobody knew about him. He didn't know about any of this. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to go on these missions. I went and around the country. as a contracted forensic consultant for any evidence they came in, and there was evidence that came in. They did nothing with it. That was interesting.
So you're talking about Tom Biscardi, right?
Yeah, the Biscardi group. So
yeah. So he's a famous, I guess, I don't know,
infamous,
well-known, infamous Bigfoot researcher. Just for people who don't know, he's been part of the Bigfoot group and really trying to push different things with a lot of money. So anyway, so yeah. Sorry, Steve.
So as we go, I'm going on this mission. Eventually in 2008, and I'd gone on a couple of missions in 2006 after button heads with him, and then I got the invite, and that kind of opened the door a bit. So in 2007, I went on a few missions, like 2 or 3 missions with them that were like month-long missions. He was never around unless the media was there. If there was video there, he was there. But other than that, it was just a team, and the team itself was pretty like, his son was kind of the team leader, and he'd be like, "What do you think, Steve?" "I think it's bullshit." And he goes, "I agree." So his son was very level-headed about stuff. So eventually, in 2008, I had enough. And there was a reason why, because I had enough information, not that he was hoaxing, but he was doing some really shade on his back end, the business stuff. To the point where I was like very suspicious of criminality into it.
Wow.
So in 2008, I said, I'm done. I'm going back to the regular life, and I went back to work, into the retail environment and being an investigator there. Then this Rick Dyer thing came on scene, and somehow, Biscardi likes to play off that, oh, well, it was Steve who introduced me. No, not true. Actually, Tom had gotten a call from Dyer. And Dyer even admits that he had called Biscardi, but never got a call back. So, Biscardi used that as an excuse that, well, if Steve's doing it, well, I better get on this,
Yeah.
So what happens there is this very long cacophony, because I hadn't exposed what Biscardi was yet. I was like, I'm going to hold on to this for a year and try to see if anything else comes down the pipe. But I didn't see any. I saw some bullshittery, not necessarily hoaxing, but I saw some stretching of the truth to the point where that's why I walked away. I'm like, hey, listen, he's starting to stretch the truth. And it came down, actually, the exact incident was the Bishopville Lizard Man. Remember, I was actually down there with the Rawsons when they took the bite out of, whatever it was, took the bite out of their vehicle and whatnot. And people were accusing them that they were tool marks, and they were trying. And no, I could see that underneath, for the impressions on top of the bumper, I could see underneath that there was a mandible that came up and kind of put pressure on that. So I'm like, no, this, and they're very round. And Biscardi's on the news saying, what you ain't got here is a lizard. You got a primate. And I'm going, no, primate teeth are not round. That's canine. And they had some blood, and the blood got tested. It was canine. I was right. They were wrong. And, that really pissed me off that, I
that
told
was a famous case. Like, for people who don't know about this case, there was a car that said that it was attacked by a lizard man. Like, there were all kinds of chew marks around, like all the wheel wells. The front of the car was all chewed up. Like, it was a mess. This was a revisit.
It happened in the 80s. This one particular, the one incident happened in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
And the sheriff was listed in Truesdale. And we had gone over to, now it happened again in 2007, 2008. Happened again, or the end of 2007. And Biscardi wanted to get wind on that because, that's going to be press. So off we go to do a lizard man thing, even though. And it's very true that the original witnesses had seen something that was Sasquatch-like, not lizard-like. But somebody, and how it got picked up was in the media back in the 80s, somebody said that the hands looked leathery, almost like a lizard. And that's how the lizard man was born, out of a Sasquatch encounter. So we get there, and, here's this new scenario. So, yeah, and actually somewhere I have a piece of the van because I took a few metal pieces of the van, as a, trophy. This is... But yeah, it turned out it was all canine, and I had known that because I was putting one and one together. I was like, okay, the bites look like canine. Can we... And I noticed the Rawsons had like 24, 25 cats. They didn't have a cat house or a little cat. They had a cat condominium there. I mean, there was like cats all over the place. So I'm like, can we open up the trunk of the van? Because it was a minivan that got chewed up this time.
Yep.
And we open up the van, and in the header screw, there's cat hair. And I'm going, Now I know why the dog went after because they're probably chasing the cat. The cat went up into the engine compartment, hid in there. And that's why you have cat hair on the engine.
That's crazy.
And the dog was going after that. So it made perfect sense to me what was going on here and why it went on. And of course, I was proven right by the DNA.
Right.
You know, but it annoyed me that my standards are very, very high. And when I heard that, I'm like, I'm just done with this.
Yeah.
So then the whole Dyer thing starts coming up, and then, I'm talking with Biscardi on this, and he's like, well, I think, this is all bullshit. I agree, because I had spent the day, and actually Biscardi to some extent later in the day, after my podcast where I had Dyer on, that Biscardi wasn't on, but he was listening to, he said, I looked into on a couple of things, and he goes, they're full of crap. And he goes, what did you find? And I said, well, I looked into a bunch of stuff, and it was a bunch of crap. So he goes, well, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. And he hung up. And that was the last I heard of anything honest from out of Tom Biscardi's mouth ever again regarding that.
Wow.
I didn't get a call back. But then after the hoax, and what eventually happened is I invited myself. I knew the logistics where they were taking that alleged frozen freezer and a freezer full of ice. So I kind of invited myself to get myself out there. And
So people who don't know, man, there was this freezer that Rick Dyer put a fake Bigfoot body into, filled it up full of water, and then froze it. And then there was this big fake Bigfoot inside of the freezer, and there were all kinds of people that jumped on board, man. I mean, it was national, national news, international, man. International, it was banging everywhere.
Yeah,
everyone really thought that Rick Dyer had a frozen Bigfoot in a cooler.
And so this gets more interesting as we walk this walk here. So I go out there in the first night, and there had been, the team had been told a lot of things by Dyer, and they didn't know what to believe. And it didn't make any help that when they were loading the freezer, allegedly there was a helicopter flying around that made them even more paranoid about the whole thing. So they take that to Eaton, Indiana. I get out there to Indianapolis. All right, we'll pick you up. No, they picked me up. The body was already in a freezer, in a truck in the freezer. The freezer was still plugged in, or actually was unplugged. And the problem I had automatically, I know this is bullshit. And the minute I'm flying, I know this is bullshit. Now, I was in the air when the press conference happened. And a few days prior to that, Biscardi had sent emails to myself, J.C. Johnson, a few other people, saying that the DNA was actually a cross between human and ape. Now that's how that was the number one crack in the in Biscardi's. Oh, I didn't do nothing. So I fly out there. No, so let me put you on the scene. So I show up there. It's now 5:00 in the evening. Everybody's eating dinner. J.C. Johnson is there. Leonard Dan is there. The investor Bill Lett is there. TJ is there. Tom's son who picked me up. Brian Mazzola, the documentarian that was always traveling with him, and Java Bob Schmalzbach, who unfortunately I hear is suffering, from dementia, from what I understand. So that's unfortunate. But even though I don't see eye with him, I don't wish that upon anybody. But so I get there and everybody's paranoid. I mean, this is an armed camp because somebody had told them that the Chinese were looking to get a hold of the body. Yeah, well, this is even before the bird flu, SARS, herpes simplex 8. This is all before that. So all that the Chinese are responsible for. That's what they get for eating bats. Anyway.
Yeah.
So weird. Pardon my French. Who the fuck eats bats? Yeah. Anyway. Right. So everybody likes a little bat tattooey every once in a while.
They're nothing but a couple bites anyway.
I know.
The risk reward, man. I just don't see it's there.
Anyway, all right. Well, as usual, I digress. But So the next morning, that evening, TJ and I are listening to Coast to Coast AM, and Lauren Coleman was on, and this guy who said, "Well, I've seen the picture, and that's my suit." And I remember the look TJ gave me. TJ gave me that look like, so he's starting to smell a rat. I've already started to smell a rat. So, all right, so we're all, in this garage, kind of sacked out, and then maybe about 5 o'clock in the morning, I feel this tap on my shoulder, and everybody else is sleeping. And I think TJ waited for that. And he woke me up. He goes, "Come on, let's go see if this fucker's real." So we get into it, and we start chipping away. Finally, we get a hair, and we pull it out, and I pull out my magnifying glass and stuff. I'm looking at him going, it's plastic. It's synthetic hair because you can see right through it. It's like tubular, it looks plastic. So then he gets Java Bob up, and it's kind of funny because Java Bob and I, and Java Bob, again, the team had no freaking clue what was going on. The only one that knew anything was, the tubby guy from that, holed up in San Francisco. And funny, that day, the Georgia boys were flying to Frisco to meet with Biscardi. So, or they were, no, I'm sorry, they were still there because they had went in on Friday. So they were there. So you have the actual Cabal 3 and everybody in the dark. Now, leading up to that, I need to make this point too, was leading up to that, I think it was like Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm getting kind of interested, like, who the hell are the scientists coming in? You say you're having scientists come in. And he says, well, well, don't worry about that, but, I got these guys from Fox that did the alien autopsy, and they're going to come in next week and film this whole thing. And, again, another little flag's going up in my head.
They did the alien autopsy.
Right, yeah. So, but nobody in the crew knew what the hell was going on. So we get the hair out, and Java Bob finally wakes up, and at the same time, we both say, let's burn it. Hair burns, plastic melts. And this thing just curled right into a ball. Plastic. Okay, we know it's fake. So Java Bob calls Biscardi, who still is trying to put him off, saying, well, that call, he don't know nothing, whatever. So we start digging at it. We put a salamander in the actual trailer to kind of help defrost this. It got so hot in there that it started melting the insulation off the freezer. It was kind of hot down, but it was warm in there. And we started chipping away. And finally, if you look at any of the video, you see this hand coming out, pulling a foot out. And you've seen that in Shooting Bigfoot, that documentary that Morgan Matthews had made, and some of the news videos. That was my hand. Oh, that was my hand. And I pull this foot out, and it's not real. Not real, fake. So he calls Biscardi, and then Biscardi starts acting. And so Biscardi calls up, I don't know if it was the next day.
Was the whole thing just a suit? Like just a synthetic suit?
And it was a suit stuffed with a lot of animal parts. The teeth were dentures. It was like really weird. And it smelled horrible. But so, okay, good. Now, hey, guess what? The proof is right here. It's not real. Thank God I was there. Thank God I was there, because this is the next day, a Sunday morning. I come in Friday, Saturday, we make the discovery. There's a lot of wrangling. I even spoke to Witten. I'm trying to say, hey, listen, you need to get the investors' money back. Well, we don't have it. Well, I'm thinking to myself, they got the money late Thursday, and here it is. Friday they were flying out in the morning. Their money has to be in somebody's house. It couldn't have been into a bank.
What kind of money are we talking about? Like
$50,000. They had gotten an advance payment of $50,000.
Like 50-5-0.
50 followed by three more zeros. 50,000.
That's crazy. That's
50
nuts,
large.
Man.
50 large.
That means that somebody bought this. You know what I mean? They bought the story. They like.
Oh, it gets better. This all gets better. So anyway, Biscardi gets on the conference call machine here, or whatever we had there. He got on speakerphone. We're all sitting around Sunday morning. All right, boys, here's what we're going to do. He goes, the boys are going to they're going to take that body back. They're going to take it back to Georgia. And we're just going to say that they couldn't handle the public pressure and took their body back and disappeared. And we're not going to talk about it. We're all going to sign NDAs, and that'll be the end of it. But we got a story here, boys, and there's money to be made, and I can't afford anybody going cowboy on me, and I knew that was directed towards me. And so, what do you say, TJ? Well, Dad, you're the boss. Brian, well, Tom, you are the boss. Now, mind you, J.C. Johnson, Leonard Dan, and Bill Lett had left that morning to get food for the day for us. So they weren't even present for them. Java Bob, well, I don't agree with it, but I don't agree with it, but you're the boss. So they were all caving. Then it came to me, Steve, you know what? I really need to think on this one. And I just stormed out.
Right.
So they ended the call. I don't know how the call ended. But they came out to see me throwing a folding chair about 50 feet into the yard. Now, people who don't know me, I can have a little flashpoint temper. And they're like, what's the matter, Steve? And I just turned around and yelled at them, I'm not going to fucking cover up a fucking hoax with another fucking hoax. No.
Yeah, right.
And from that point on, Biscardi never said another word to me. I never heard from him again. It was always through either an intermediary, while I was there. Oh, well, Tom wants you to, Tom says this, Tom says that. Never spoke to me again about it.
That's great.
Well, I can't say that. We went in there, we told him, all right, well, you can tell me. And he hung up real quick, and that was it. And that was the last I really heard of Tom Biscardi. So what I realized, so eventually, moving forward, I did a podcast. I probably should have held off on the podcast till I got out of enemy camp, but somebody had asked me, well, do you think Tom Biscardi's involved? Well, at that point, I have no physical evidence to say he was or wasn't. So I said, I don't think so. There's no evidence to support that just yet. There may be some colloquial, oh, well, he did this. But then, somebody had forwarded me the email with instead of a possum, which the DNA report was, it said ape. So somewhere it had been altered to Biscardi, or Biscardi altered it himself and sent it out. Eventually, I ended up talking with Rick Dyer, because Rick Dyer was saying, I don't know if Steve's involved in the hoax. Whoa, how the fuck did I wasn't even supposed to be there.
Right.
So him and I started dialogue, and I actually go down to Georgia in February of 2009. And for people, people that don't understand that, as an investigator, sometimes you have to deal with people that are unsavory to get the information you want. It's a fact of life. Confidential informants are informants a lot of times not because of their pristine records. It's because they have broken the rules somewhere down the road, got caught, and now they're willing to help us out in like good moral turpitude. So I went down there. Turpitude. So I went down to Georgia. And, Dyer's like, well, whatever you want. Well, I want to see this, and this. So the first stop was he took me to the hotel. And I flew in the evening. We went out to dinner. We talked. And Rick Dyer outside of Bigfoot actually is really a nice guy. He's not a fun guy to be around. But inside Bigfoot, he is a terror. But I kind of had him on the... So... We went to the hotel where they had the meeting, so I took pictures of that. Then we went to where they picked the body up, took pictures of that. Where they exchanged the money, which was the Clayton County Courthouse parking lot, took pictures of that. I knew that I was at the right site, especially with the body pickup site, because I'd seen the video. Okay, there it is. I don't know where. There was a guy by the name of Frank Pearson, who was actually a felon that was living in that house, and for whatever reason, I didn't see him that day, but we end up going to the store where he bought the freezer. This was quintessential, and I go, well, do you have the receipt? He goes, no, but I can get you a copy. So he goes, come on, and we went down to the desk, and they said, listen, I bought a freezer here in August. Well, what's your name? And boom, they printed off the receipt. They handed it to him. He turned around and handed it to me. So, excuse me, I know the chain of evidence is good on this. Because I saw it get printed right off. And there it was. And the date on the freezer was August 8th, 2008, 8808, or 080808. So, that had significance because it was bought at 8:20 p.m. The freezer holds 124 cubic feet of water, which it's going to take in a freezer. It's going to take a few days to freeze, right?
Oh yeah, man, that's a lot of water.
Yep. So Biscardi had flown in his second time to Georgia that evening. So anything that Biscardi had said afterwards, saying, well, I touched it, smelled it, what he was saying in the broadcast, obviously was not frozen. He could very clearly see what it was. There was no way around that. So that freezer receipt, in essence, destroyed Biscardi's timeline that he had nothing to do with it. So that's why that became so important, and that's hard. That's hard evidence, hard investigation. And there was some other allegation, like that the paint, the face on the costume was painted black. That was Biscardi's idea. He went and bought the paint at an auto parts store. Unfortunately, those records are confidential, and there's nothing unless there's a criminal subpoena. It can be to. So this even gets better. So I'm asking all the questions. Well, what was the angle? He goes, well, the whole angle was, Biscardi was going to do a film,
right?
Do the Bigfoot autopsy film, sell it to Fox for a few $1 million, and it didn't matter what happened after that. It was, because the money's in the pocket. And then it clicked, because he didn't know that Biscardi ever told me that people were coming out from Fox who did the alien autopsy video. So all the puzzle pieces kind of met. That testimony that Rick gave actually fit with what Biscardi had said to me pre-incident. So everything fit like right into, okay, so I knew what was going on. But I did something nobody else had ever done in their life. And that is, I foiled the police report, because after that there was a big cabal about trying to get them up on criminal charges, get the money back. And Bill Lett had, the investor, the guy who took the money out, and I actually foiled the police report. I actually have the ATM receipt for the $50,000, which is cool.
Yeah.
And going through all the stuff. Well, it turns out that Bill Lett, there's a little controversy going on there. Biscardi said that, or Bill Lett said that Biscardi asked him to loan the money to Biscardi, and Biscardi was to repay him $75,000 within 90 days. Obviously, that was only if it was real. But there was no written agreement. There was nothing either one could say. But the police were like, whoa, well, if you loan that money to him, Mr. Lett, and you're saying this, it's up to Mr. Biscardi to press the charges.
Right.
And there were statements from Jabba Bob, TJ Biscardi, who was Tom's son, Bob Schmalzbach, and the only thing they ever got, the person who had the most interaction with the suspects, basically took a statement that I had written that was edited by Java Bob, even says right on it, edited by Java Bob. And on the top of it says, here's what happened. Carmine Biscardi. And sent it into the police department. So he never wrote a statement on what had happened. And that's why everything. And then what happened is that they call up Biscardi when the suit went up on eBay, because here we are, months down the road. Now the suit's up on eBay, and supposedly somebody put in a bid for it for $250,000. Yeah, it wasn't a real bid. They ended up saying, they totally hosed them and said, no, I'm not. Right. So Biscardi gets a call from the police department, and this is all right in the file. This is all stuff and the way the captain had said is, well, I spoke to Biscardi about him, asked him about the eBay auction, and he acted surprised, and but then later alluded that he knew the dollar amount the auction was up to. And after telling him, well, nobody's got the right to sell, that's my suit, I paid for that, blah 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 blah. And he said, well, it's up to $250,000.
What?
Yeah. So he knew about it, and so the next day, the whole criminal case was dropped. The police said, this guy's effing playing games, and he's not, this is a piece of, this is not a statement. this is the guy that needs to sign the papers. This is not a statement. And, he's dicking around with us. Boom. So they drop the whole thing, sends it over to the DA. Hey, what do you think of that? And of course, the DA just, we're not prosecuting this. And that was the end of that. So, yeah, you can tell that just by the actions of that is you always look at post-incident actions, and every single action in regards to the investigation. You would think that if Biscardi felt ripped off, like he was so big blabbermouthing, especially on that he came out with this, part of my French, this bullshit documentary called Anatomy of a Bigfoot Hoax, and it was nothing long about an hour and a half long soliloquy of how they got, fooled and ripped off by Rick Dyer, when in actuality they could have resolved it.
Yeah.
By, again, post-incident behavior in the real world. He acted like one of the participants, not like a victim. Simple as that.
So crazy.
And so, to make matters even more interesting, when I wrote my first book, which was 50 Large, which was based on this, Biscardi's enterprise at the time, I had suggested very succinctly that it possibly was a Ponzi scheme. Because he was taking a lot of investment money that was for hotels, which he'd been taking money for hotels since 2006, and not hotels, rather museums.
Oh, wow.
And since 2006. At the time I had left them, he had already gotten like almost $500,000 for museums, and never erected one. They all. I've seen, even in their own business plan, I've seen letters of intent to say, yes, we're going to open this up for you to build your Bigfoot museum. But they always fall through. Interesting. But he's still always taking money from museums. And if you look at the long list of museums, I'm going to build one on the San Francisco Pier. I'm going to have one on the Blackfeet Tribe reservation. I'm going to have one in the White Mountain Apache Tribe. I'm going to have one in Sacramento. I'm going to have one in Las Vegas, the Bigfoot Shop and Props store. And none of them ever pan out.
Oh, wow.
There's 5 or 6 examples. So he's receiving all this money, and he justified, well, we need this money to do, and he takes that money and then he puts it into their so-called expeditions, where are nothing but feeding missions to see if the media will come out and give him a little photo coverage. But what it's based upon is getting this money to keep himself sustained. So that's exactly what goes on. Now the funny thing is the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer searching for Bigfoot, at the time, was David Nielsen, who owned a company called Cedar Mortgage, and that all went down in a Ponzi scheme.
So nuts, man. There's so many
and Nielsen went to Fed prison, and I think he may have just gotten out, or he's scheduled to get out real soon. I'm not really sure on what it is. But even after the fact, as late as 2010, Biscardi had opened a foreign corporation with David Nielsen, and I think that was to hide money. Now, here's another interesting thing too: is I did an article. I was questioned about this. From a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. Of course, they didn't print any of this because it was far too controversial for them to get in trouble. But she had talked with the executor of this whole bankruptcy and the whole thing going on with the Cedar Mortgage Company, and he confirmed to her that there were checks from Cedar Mortgage that went to searching for Bigfoot.
Oh, that's crazy.
So... and then and this is how bad it gets. In 2015, the Searching for Bigfoot shareholder, I may add, and an attorney sends me a threatening letter. Mind you, the book had already been written 5 years at that point in time, or 4 years. So it's beyond any statute of limitation as far as, well, you got Mr. Biscardi and us consorting with a lot of unsavory people. Yeah, like who, Rick Dyer and David Nielsen? Guess what? I got your business plan that Rick Dyer had, and it says David Nielsen is your CFO. So, I have the proof there. So he writes this letter, you were cease and desist and blah, blah, blah. And I turned around and I said, you know what? I'm not cease and desisting anything. And I go, if you take me to court, my first witness is going to be Tom Biscardi.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to put him on the witness stand.
Yeah.
Right? Boom, never heard another. Well, apparently you think you're an attorney. No, I don't think I'm an attorney, but I'm a goddamn good investigator.
Right.
And
right.
I know
and that's
how
what
to.
this is all about, right? Like,
But people don't understand. My job is to put together cases and pass it off to attorneys for prosecution or for defense or for whatever, for legal justification, whether it be an insurance claim, whether it be a criminal case, or even a civil case. It doesn't matter. That's my job, is to take all this stuff, this stuff, and what an investigator is, more or less, is an information broker. That's all an investigator is. And when I apply this to, the Bigfoot field, it's the same way. It's to package this up, and instead of passing it off to the attorney, maybe I'll pass it off to the court of public opinion or to science if need be.
Right. If somebody will listen.
I'm not a scientist.
Right.
So for me to say, well, scientifically, no, I don't have that qualification. Right. But from an investigation standpoint, I believe it has credence, and that's the way I try to put things out there.
All right, so I've got to ask you the ultimate Bigfoot question, man.
Sure.
The Patty film, because you've been an investigator for umpteen million years. You've been around this stuff forever. You've busted the biggest hoaxers on the planet. If you were to be asked, is the Patty film real? Is that really a Bigfoot? As he lights a cigarette, that's just badass right there, man. It is
getting ready for the big.
Yeah. Is the Patterson Gimlin film real? That's the question.
Well, let's put the spotlight on me. I feel like I'm in an interrogation. That's why. Hello, Mr. Kulls. Would you like a cigarette? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the fact is that I don't know. I don't know. There are, when you look at things, and I know there's been some allegations made about Patterson's background, which could lead motivation to staging something. Absolutely. Is there a film clip that kind of defies something? I've talked recently about, and even in my book, I talk about, we have to look at everything with fresh eyes and open eyes. And, Patty was a female Sasquatch. Then why does she have a conical-shaped head when in primates the conical-shaped head is a male characteristic, not a female? So that kind of makes me go, I don't know. And that was actually brought up by Dr. John Napier in 1972 in his book Bigfoot. And John Napier, for those who don't know, was an anthropologist who was a curator at the Smithsonian Museum, who had a very open mind to the existence of these creatures. So, he had a lot of credence for certain sightings and a lot of things he didn't have. And he went on with a lot of other soliloquies about, the locomotion of Patty. And I don't necessarily buy into that, but the thing that stood out most to me was the conical shaped head. So I don't know, man.
Well, is there anything else that kind of makes you wonder? Is there a frame or something? What is it, 372 is the frame? Is that what is it about?
Well, the butt frame always makes me scratch my head. Not having a butt crack, okay, that kind of makes me scratch my head. Yeah. But
so what do you think about the?
Well, here, let me break into the three pieces that. So, from what I see, the post incident behavior, as far as them actually going in and researching. Now, I'm going to look into all this other Greg Long crap because I think Greg Long may have gone in with a bias, but then again, what he saw may have biased him. So I don't know. I don't buy for 1 minute that Hieronymus had anything to do with it, because Hieronymus's statement and his post-incident behavior was completely wrong for somebody that just hoaxed a film. You don't hoax a film expecting a payoff and go into a bar and say, "Hey, look at this. Just remember that." Because that's gonna expose your hoax pretty quick, won't it?
Yeah,
and it's funny. And it's
Bill Hieronymus. Who was he? A real
Bob Hieronymus was just a Yakima associate, Yakima, Washington associate of Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin.
See, that's the person in my mind has always had the possibility of being in that suit, man. Like, I think he nailed that walk, you know? Like,
well, you know, big deal. I can nail that walk too. You know, the bottom line, he had 38 years to practice that before he came out of the so-called closet. But you see, that's the issue I have with it. If you're looking to get a payoff, and if you're looking to get a payoff, why would you show anybody else? You would ruin that hoax. And why haven't those people come forward before Mr. Hieronymus and said, "Hey, you know, I know the guy that was the guy in the suit."
Right.
Nobody's done that. It was only when Hieronymus came out. And originally, Hieronymus' story was he never told anybody but his mother and his nephew. So it changed. And his first story made more sense. But as we see in people that make up stories, they get more detailed. And that was very true with Susan Smith when she claimed she got carjacked by an African-American male and put it in the pond, killing her kids. The way they found out is, and it's very clear when you do investigative.
You froze up there, Steve. You froze up, Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What happened?
With Smith, what happened is she lied and she claimed that she was carjacked by an African American male, and through the interviews with the police, she became more detailed and things changed, and like the Hieronymus case. And as it turned out with Smith, her kids were actually drowned in a pond, and she put the car in a lake, and the kids drowned in their car seats. She was lying the whole time. She was a single mom having a relationship with this guy who didn't want kids, and that was really her motivation behind it. But originally she had came out with the story. And the way we look at people, how they tell their stories when they're not telling the truth, they become more detailed with the story. Like for example, you see A, B, C, D. Now, time, space, relations can change over time. Things that are 5 feet can become 6 feet, can become 4 feet, can be 10 minutes. That's all natural. But the way a story should go is A, B, C, D, E. When Hieronymus talked, we had A, B, C. You know, I did the film, I took the suit, and I showed my mom and my nephew. But then all of a sudden we have this interdiction of another element. I did the film, I took the suit and showed the guys in the bar, and then I showed my mom, and then they took the suit. So you see, all that's where there becomes a problem with this. And again, post-incident behavior, if you're looking to get paid, why would you go into a bar and say, "Hey, look at this, just remember that. You know, a couple of days, just remember that." So you see the thing, and wait a minute, but we have nobody come forward for 38 years except Bob Hieronymus, who miraculously. And if you don't think he was in it for the money, I showed this picture on the show a couple of weeks ago. Go to eBay and go Bob Hieronymus Bigfoot, and you'll find autographed pictures of Patty on sale.
That's in for the money, man. I mean,
exactly. Exactly. Philip Morris was just looking for the notoriety, you know, and I don't buy that. Oh, in '69 I saw the film or whatever, and I said, "Oh, that's my suit." You know, come on, really? You know, maybe getting sued by the people that create, because he was doing knockoff Barney costumes and got sued by the creators of Barney.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, you know, he's a guy that's got some shade on him. So, and then the suit recreation they did back, you know, some years ago, it looked nothing like it. But I also tell people too, just because Bob Hieronymus is lying, doesn't mean the Patterson-Gimlin film is real or fake.
Right.
It's a separate issue. People have trouble sometimes separating the issue, and then we get into the massacre theory that has, you know, resurfaced again. And it's
man, that's all over the place. I've been like scrolling through Facebook and I see this, like, I stand with Bob. I had no idea what that was about. And I suppose that's what you're about to talk about, like why I'm seeing this stand with Bob thing.
Well, I'm not going to, I am going to be putting this out on my show this week. So there's a lot of stuff, some of the work of Tom Steenberg, excellent work on how he kind of tears that apart pretty well. And you would expect Steenberg to know because he's been around for years. Knows the players. MK, well, he lives in Mississippi, and people will say, well, he went to the site.
So,
Well,
so overview of this. So, like MK Davis, right? That's who you're referring to.
Correct.
Like this person, MK Davis, I think I know very little, came up with a theory about there being like a Bigfoot massacre at the site where Patterson and Gimlin allegedly filmed a Bigfoot.
Right.
And yeah. So what is that true?
No. I made a comment. I made a comment that if he was a legit investigator, he would last about 1 or 2 minutes in the real world of investigation, because you can't say, and I see a major flaw with it all. He'd done a lot of work restoring the Patterson Gimlin film. But when you do restoration, what are you doing? You're doing color alterations quite a bit too. So in one of his color alterations, he started seeing this rust-colored puddle, and this rust-colored paw print, and rust color on a hand. Well, a lot of people don't know this, but blood turns rust-colored only for a very short period of time. After a while, it turns black. So we shouldn't be looking for rust color. We should be looking for black, tarry black, dry. Blood dries. So as blood dries, so then people can say, well, maybe it was in that certain state. Okay, so all right, so you're seeing this color on a color-corrected film. So we don't even know if that's the true color of it. But again, Mr. Steenberg does a lot of work with that, as well as, this guy is wrong a lot of times, but he's been right on this one. With Thinker Thunker showed about the color correction thing, and it made a lot of sense. He's a guy on YouTube. But you can't base a massacre theory upon.
So what does he think happened? Like there was a family of Bigfoots cruising by.
Yeah, there was a
pulls out an AK-47, starts clocking off.
Apparently, there has something to do with some Canadians, and they came down and they were basically there to clear out the Bigfoot out of the area so they can log it, which makes no sense because you look at the area and it's got lots of trees in it now, even overgrown. So none of it really makes a lot of sense. How you can go from thinking you see a bloody paw print and seeing a bloody handprint and this puddle of blood and blowing it up into this big massacre theory with no hard evidence, no witnesses. Again, if you have something like that, why hasn't somebody in the last 50 years come forward? Well, I know they're real because I shot a family of them. Now let's look at post and pre and post behavior of Bob and Roger. Is that okay? So there's a massacre. Let's show a film to the world and make money off of that. Makes sense? Absolutely. If a massacre happened, does that make sense? No. You'll be like, hey, look at this. This is a Bigfoot. Right. That's how you make the money. So it makes no sense at all. Just think of the common sense thing. People say, well, it was human and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you know what? That was also, 50 years ago? Yeah, people thought a lot differently back then, and they probably would not have been prosecuted.
Yeah.
If they brought forth a body. So, and by the way, there is a lot of the U.S. Forest Service, as well as New York, said if you cap something that's not in the books, it's not illegal. It's not murder. It's not in the books. We can't. We can't do that. If we claim that this is a hominid today, we can't go back 2 weeks ago and say, well, you killed a hominid. This is when we classified it. So the people that think that people can be charged with murder for that are completely off their legal basis.
Yeah, I totally agree. You can't charge someone for murder for that. Like, especially if you have can you imagine like a 1,300-pound gorilla coming at you pissed off? Like, I would probably shoot it, man. And, people talk about like no kill. Well, I'm no kill too, but if something is aggressively coming at me, I shoot it.
It's kind of like, legalization of marijuana. Okay, they legalized it today. Well, this guy was convicted 2 months ago of having marijuana. You can't go back and clear his record because at that time it was a crime. It goes the same the other way around. Somebody commits a murder 2 months ago, and today you declared the death penalty on murder. You can't go back and say, hey, you killed someone, we're going to put you on death row. No, the law wasn't in effect.
Right.
So you can't claim somebody committed a homicide if the thing has not been declared a hominid. And it will only become declared a hominid on a specific date, and you can't go back and say, hey. So, again, that makes no sense. So people don't stand, the people that believe in this theory. Now, the funny thing is all this hubbub came about, and I think it's because somebody was watching my podcast. Because when I talked about Hieronymus, we had made this little innocuous remark about the massacre theory. And we went on for about 5 or 10 minutes on it. And then within a couple of days, we have Scott Carpenter putting out, MK's puppet there, claiming that, the massacre was real. We have this goober called Steve Ishdahl, How to Hunt, who has come on the scene within the last year claiming to know everything about Bigfoot, including, and I'll get into that in a second. And all of a sudden they're starting to spinning this whole thing up. So I think they're watching it, caught on it, and or at least one of them caught on to it and kind of said, well, I'm going to do this. Now, here's the interesting thing about Mr. Isdahl. For months, he's been claiming that people like Dr. Meldrum and, they know it's not flesh and blood. They know it's not flesh and blood. This thing is not flesh and blood. This is Isdahl talking. And they get paid to say it is. Like this, some kind of conspiracy theory behind, whether it be, they're just out for the money or whatever, which is kind of disingenuous because he monetizes his YouTube channel. But now he's claiming that the massacre theory is, I can't believe people have gone to their grave. He's coming out with this in his outrage over the massacre and whatnot. So I posed the question, well, if Bigfoot's supernatural or demonic, how did these Canadian assassins kill the Bigfoot? Holy water? Proton packs? Silver bullets? Right? So to me, him backing up the massacre theory is disingenuous because he's saying they're supernatural and they're not flesh and blood. So,
right. A lot of people lately have been trying to tell me that they're aliens too. So I don't know what the hell Bigfoot is, but
okay. So you want my lowdown on that real quick? You'll enjoy this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I do with criminal psychology is you try to put yourself into the mind of people, and that's how you kind of work through, the steps of how people do things. And I'll give you my first example, and then I'm going to give you the alternative massacre theory example, if you believe the evidence it was blood. But as far as UFOs coming, Bigfoot coming from UFOs, number one, let's just look at the common sense thing. We go to the moon. Do we go to the moon naked?
I know.
Right? There's ticks, chiggers, fleas, all kinds of stuff, and I'm covered in hair, and I'm going to show up naked out of the UFO. No, makes no sense.
Right.
Defies all common sense. We know that the animals, particularly cows, let's go back to the 70s. I mean, how many times have we had cattle mutilations and people seeing UFOs over cows? Nobody ever suggested the cows were aliens. But, Bill, think about this. Maybe they are. Maybe the cows are the aliens. And what have we been doing? We've been drinking their milk.
Yeah.
Mind control.
Eating the aliens.
You see, yeah. You see what I mean? It makes no sense at all for this. Alternatively, the massacre theory, I said, well, why does people think there's a massacre theory? If that is blood and a bloody paw print, maybe Bigfoot was tracking down some coyote or wolves and eating them.
That would make more sense.
And then they buried the bodies themselves because, hey, they buried their dead, right? No, they don't bury their dead. But you'd be finding their bones if they buried their dead. But in this alternative reality that I've created based on evidence, you see, that is what we deal with in this massacre theory, is an alternative reality created by something you perceive as something.
Right.
I think that the Bigfoot and the UFO phenomenon is two separate things. I've always said this, that if the people in the UFOs are so interested in studying us by doing abductions, and they were grabbing cows in the 70s and 80s, the chimpanzees are close to us. I think Bigfoot's even closer. If it isn't a real animal, it would come up DNA wise even closer than the chimpanzee. Well, why wouldn't they be studying them too?
Makes sense, brother.
That's the easiest explanation. Not that they're aliens and that they've been placed here as something, or they're Nephilim. And it's kind of funny because somebody asked me on a show on my video blog a couple of nights ago. Somebody said, "Oh, what do you think about the Nephilim theory?" I don't. I think I'm a Christian and I'm a believer, but as far as Bigfoot being Nephilim, I don't see that. I mean, that's just pure fantasy and stretching.
Yeah, but check it out, man. The Mormons, you can Google this guy. You can Mormon it's like Cain is Bigfoot, man.
Oh yeah. So it's kind of funny. Somebody posted a response on that. I've since deleted it, but you're an idiot. And then I go, okay, well, let's see who this person is. And they have all these like Bible thumping stuff, and I'm a good Christian. So you're a good Christian, but instead of questioning, you just go out and call a name. Right. Come on, really? Right. So deleted, blocked. You're not going to see many more of my videos. Goodbye. You have nothing intelligent to say. I am all up for dissent. I'm up for a good debate, but I am not going to deal with people that, well, you're an idiot. Really? Well, you're an idiot for calling me an idiot. Have a good day. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, we have reached our 1 hour mark here, dude, and that went by really fast. So basically our conclusions are you don't know if the Bigfoot footage is real, the Patterson-Gimlin film. You don't believe in the massacre, and cows are aliens. So that's been our conclusion.
The cows are aliens.
Yeah, that's been the conclusion of our little video cast here, man. But thanks a lot for hanging out with me for a while, Steve. I really appreciate it, man.
All right, brother. Be safe.
Yeah. And, so where can people find you?
SquatchDetective.com. And you can get all information there. SquatchDTV.com. Information about to go, SquatchDetective.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, brother. And everybody, I will be back tomorrow here on Lockdown, 12 o'clock.